This is Boston Lanka News, bringing you news, views and entertainment from Boston and USA. I'm Vayoni Dimel.
The government of Sri Lanka has failed to ensure independent and credible investigations into alleged violations and abuses committed by both parties during the conflict in Sri Lanka.
The government of Sri Lanka reiterates its rejection of Resolution 22/1 as well as the High Commissioner's report in its entirety, which are fundamentally flawed.
We will do it in Sri Lanka, where the government still has not answered basic demands for accountability and reconciliation.
Today, we are talking of international intervention, an independent international inquiry, the last stages of the war. Last stages of the war weren't the only war. They weren't only victims of Sri Lanka's 30-year history.
What happened during the civil war against the IRA? Bloody Sunday in Londonderry, 1972. Only civilian casualties, no fog of war. The British paratroopers were the only ones who were armed. It took 28 years and 2 inquiries for Britain to produce a report. These are the countries which are asking us to have an international inquiry into a civil war against a ferocious terrorist militia.
When our nation's marching forward, you pretend you're blind. Why enjoy breaking us up? Is that your only style? Divide and rule, it lasted in colonial times. Now be a wise to your disguise, Mr. Cameron. Now be a wise to your disguise, Mr. Cameron.
This is a special edition on UNHRC Resolution on Sri Lanka. The resolution on Sri Lanka calling for an international, independent and credible investigation into alleged humanitarian and human rights law violations have been tabled at the 25th session of United Nations Human Rights Council in Geneva on Monday.
A year ago, this council asked the High Commissioner to report on the human rights situation in Sri Lanka. That report, received by members of this council in recent days, is unambiguous. The government of Sri Lanka has failed to ensure independent and credible investigations into alleged violations and abuses committed by both parties during the conflict in Sri Lanka. The majority of recommendations from successive Human Rights Council resolutions remain unimplemented, nor has the Sri Lankan government accepted offers of technical assistance from the UN. The time has now clearly come for international action with regard to Sri Lanka. This Council has a duty to act on the findings of the report we collectively commissioned and to establish the truth. If we fail to do so, where does that leave us? I hope the Human Rights Council can unite to support the call for an independent investigation into alleged human rights violations and abuses on both sides. This will help pave the way for lasting reconciliation. I believe that the support and technical assistance of the Office of the High Commissioner and the collective concern expressed in the resolutions of this Council have a valuable role to play in ensuring progress towards lasting peace and reconciliation in Sri Lanka.
The resolution HRC 25/1 welcomes and acknowledges the progress made by the government of Sri Lanka in rebuilding infrastructure, demining and resettling the majority of internally displaced persons. However, the resolution notes that considerable work lies ahead in the areas of justice, reconciliation, demilitarization and the resumption of livelihoods, and stressing the importance of the full participation of local populations, including representatives of civil society and minorities in the efforts.
Mr. President, it is imperative that the Human Rights Council remains a credible and independent arbiter in dealing with global human rights situations. We remain deeply concerned that the lack of financial independence of the OHCHR leads to the erosion of independence in its overall functioning.
Sri Lankan government, backed by China and Russia, has said Pillay has failed to investigate the military interventions in Iraq, Afghanistan and Libya and allegations of human rights abuses taking place in those countries.
The disproportionate attention being paid to country-specific action in the Council, which selectively targets some countries, while situations, human rights violations and restrictive practices in other parts of the world that warrant more urgent and immediate attention and action remain conveniently ignored, is a matter of serious concern as it exploits human rights for political purposes. Regrettably, a similar pattern is evident in the case of continued action on Sri Lanka in this Council. Mr. President, notwithstanding Sri Lanka's non-recognition of the country-specific action taken against my country at the behest of a few countries in this Council, without basis and without the consent of the country concerned, Sri Lanka has continued its proactive engagement with the UN, this Council and the UNHRC in a spirit of transparency, cooperation and dialogue.
Human rights groups have welcomed Pillay's report, citing Sri Lanka's failure to comply with 2 successive UNHRC resolutions.
There have been allegations on changing the demography of the northern areas by resettling people other than Tamils. In the early 1980s, before the ethnic cleansing by the LTTE, over 75,000 Muslims and over 35,000 Sinhalese coexisted peacefully in the north of Sri Lanka. Today, 51% of the population in Colombo city is non-Sinhalese, which is testimony to the fact that the people of Sri Lanka can freely choose where they want to live, and there are no efforts to create mono-ethnic niches within our country.
A vote on the resolution is scheduled for the last week of the session, starting on March 24th.
Sri Lanka remains open to consideration of technical cooperation from the UNHRC in some key areas in reconciliation, in line with the needs of the country, in the context of implementing the National Plan of Action of the LLRC, as well as the accepted recommendations of Sri Lanka's UPR second cycle.
Contact Colombo Express for all your shipping needs. Colombo Express.
Meanwhile, Indian Prime Minister Manmohan Singh on Tuesday met Sri Lankan President Mahinda Rajapaksa but did not disclose which way New Delhi would vote on the UN resolution. Briefing reporters, Indian External Affairs Ministry spokesperson said Singh told Rajapaksa that India had just seen the UNHRC resolution on Lanka, which has important implications for both countries. According to the spokesperson, the 2 leaders did not have any in-depth discussion on the UNHRC resolution. As Indian government contemplates its stand on the resolution, Tamil Nadu Chief Minister J. Jayalalitha's party poll manifesto proposed to hold a referendum amongst Tamils in Sri Lanka and displace Sri Lankan Tamils across the world for formation of a separate elam. In Sri Lanka, for over 27 years, the war caused significant hardships for the population, environment and the economy of the country, with an estimated 80,000 to 100,000 people killed during its course.
The LTTE was the world's most ruthless terrorist organization. For over 30 years, the LTTE took not only the lives of those who got in their way, but the will and freedom of all under their brutal control. The LTTE terrorists indiscriminately attacked and murdered thousands of innocent civilians of all communities throughout Sri Lanka, setting off bombs in crowded public places, raiding villages and butchering infants, children, pregnant mothers and the elderly. The LTTE tigers abducted children as young as 10 years of age. The LTTE forced them into combat operations, including suicide attacks. The LTTE systematically targeted elected officials, murdering mayors and members of parliament, ministers and 2 heads of state, President Ranasinghe Premadasa and the Indian Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi. It wiped out all competing Tamil military groups and assassinated countless moderate Tamil politicians, academics, community leaders and religious figures.
Under the political leadership of President Mahinda Rajapaksa and ably supported with the leaderships of Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa and General Sarath Fonseca, Sri Lanka defeated the LTTE in May 2009, bringing the civil war to an end. In Capitol Hill, U.S. Senators Richard Burr, Republican, and Bob Casey, Democrat, introduced a resolution calling for an independent investigation into allegations of war crimes during the Sri Lankan conflict and urging the government of Sri Lanka to uphold media freedoms.
The government were determined to finish the LTTE off militarily, no matter what it cost, including in civilian lives. They didn't believe that anybody in the international community was prepared to stop them, and they were right.
About a week ago, another resolution was introduced by 11 senior senators calling on the United States government and the international community to assist the government of Sri Lanka with due regard to its sovereignty, stability and security in establishing domestic mechanisms to deal with any grievances arising from actions committed by both sides during and after the civil war in Sri Lanka. This resolution expresses support for internal rebuilding, resettlement and reconciliation within Sri Lanka that is necessary to ensure a lasting peace. It also commends the Sri Lankan government in holding elections that has allowed the people of the north of Sri Lanka to exercise their political rights that had been withheld from them for more than 20 years by the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam, LTTE. In Washington, D.C., releasing the 2013 Human Rights Report, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said the Sri Lankan government officials and others tied to the ruling coalition enjoyed a high degree of impunity.
We will do it in Sri Lanka, where the government still has not answered basic demands for accountability and reconciliation, where attacks on civil society activists, journalists, and religious minorities, sadly, still continue. Our concern about this ongoing situation has led the United States to support another UN Human Rights Council resolution at the March session. We will do so because we know countries that deny human rights and human dignity challenge our interests as well as human interests. But we also know countries that advance those values, those countries that embrace these rights, are countries that actually create opportunities.
Sri Lanka's ambassador to the United States, Jalia Wickramasuriya, in a letter published in the New York Times, said that some demands for accountability for what happened during Sri Lanka's tragic 30-year conflict with terrorism represents a narrow focus on a complex reality. He says for peace to take hold, one must tread carefully to establish the conditions for successful reconciliation in more areas than justice alone. The Tamil National Alliance, in a statement, backed UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Nawai Pillai's call for setting up of an independent probe. The TNA said the High Commissioner has raised a number of serious concerns in her report which also pertain to the entire country. The treatment of former combatants and detainees, attacks on religious minorities, the attack on dissent and the freedom of expression, the government's dismal record in implementing LLRC recommendations, and the government's disinterest in making progress on accountability. The TNA's response stands in contrast to the Sri Lankan government's reply to Pillai's report, which said conclusions and recommendations contained in the report reflected bias and were tantamount to an unwarranted interference in the internal affairs of a sovereign state.
When I speak to the members of the diplomatic community, they ask, why isn't this government providing a solution to the Tamil problem? And They carry on. They speak. And I always thought, when they ask such question, are they equating Tamil problem to the northern problem? Are they equating TNA equals Tamils? Because invariably, wherever one travels, there are a lot of misconception about the Tamils. Why do I say that? There are 3.2 million Tamils in Sri Lanka. Ladies and gentlemen, only 900,000 of whom live in the northern province. So when they talk of Tamil problem, if you find a solution to the northern province and whatever concerns that may be there, you are dealing with the problems of northern province, not of the Tamil community as a whole. When people talk about providing devolution of powers to the northern province, they think that they are solving the Tamil problem. But just imagine, you're talking about 900,000 people out of 3.2 million. When you speak of LTT equals Tamils, or today, the Tamil National Alliance equals of Tamils, ladies and gentlemen, the national parties, the Sri Lanka Freedom Party and the United National Party, gains more support of the 3.2 million Tamils than the Tamil National Alliance. Because, ladies and gentlemen, Tamil National Alliance is a regional political party concentrated in the northern and eastern provinces. So these are important matters. Why? Because international community is still unaware of the complexities involved.
Arun Thambimuthu, SLFE Batiklo district organizer, son of former MP Sam Thambimuthu, who was gunned down by LTTE in 1980s, has become a forceful advocate for the government in promoting domestic mechanism to address international concerns.
Ladies and gentlemen, reconciliation is going on, no doubt, but challenges are there too. What are the challenges? Many challenges. There's a section of Tamil community who feel that somehow the international community will provide them the answer to their long cherished dream, separation of northern and eastern Sri Lanka. Now, however, they feel that if not the eastern Sri Lanka, at least northern Sri Lanka. Ladies and gentlemen, it is the responsibility of all concerned to understand that concerns of Tamil community is not restricted to the concerns of one province, people who are living there. Ladies and gentlemen, one cannot jeopardize the lives of 2.3 million Tamils because you want to find a solution to the aspirations of 900,000. And I'm not even talking about how many of them have the same aspirations, but I'm talking on the basis of the differences that you have. Ladies and gentlemen, it is important today, the challenges that Sri Lanka will face. We traveled recently to South Africa. We looked at the truth and reconciliation model there. We are studying various models of reconciliation, but Sri Lanka has to evolve its own model. We cannot, because our own experiences, ladies and gentlemen, is unique. Like every country has its unique experiences.
A grand musical show by two leading veteran Sri Lankan vocalists, Nanda Malini and Victor Ratnayake. Live concert in Los Angeles, their first USA tour together. Visiting USA after 9 years. On Saturday, April 19th at 7 p.m. at a wheelchair-able theatre in Los Angeles. Sponsored, organized and produced by Thusita De Silva. Media sponsor, Boston Lanka. While there are many factors for the international community to single out Sri Lanka, many Sri Lankans call the Sri Lankan government to offer a viable plan of action to address some of the concerns of the international community. Dr. Dayan Jayathilaka, a seasoned diplomat and political scientist, laid out a plan for Sri Lanka at a recent interview with Boston Lanka.
One is that President Rajapaksa appoints an independent domestic inquiry as recommended by the Lessons Learned and Reconciliation Commission to investigate certain specific acts or events that took place at the tail end of the war. And this commission should be headed by an internationally renowned Sri Lankan such as Justice C.G. Veeramantri, who was the Vice President of the World Court, or Sir Desmond de Silva, Queen's Counsel, who was a Chief Prosecutor in the International Criminal Court at The Hague. So that's step one. Imagine, tomorrow morning you wake up. Sri Lanka has a commission of inquiry with C.G. Veeramantri heading it, or Sir Desmond de Silva heading it. What are the Americans going to do? Bring a resolution? Say it's not good enough? This is the former Vice President of the World Court. Is Navi Pillai going to say, I don't trust C.G. Veeramantri? No. It'll go away. The second suggestion I would make to the President is use the good offices of the South Africans in starting or restarting the process of political dialogue with the TNA and the Northern Provincial Council. Right now, there is no political process. There's nothing. Occasionally they meet. There is no ongoing dialogue. That dialogue is not going to take place in the Parliamentary Select Committee. I mean, who's going there? Nobody's going there. It has to be chaired by the President himself. And it has to be with Sambandhan and Vigneshwar. If it cannot be done alone, the South Africans have appointed a top politician, Cyril Ramaphosa, a legend in Africa, as their special envoy on peace and reconciliation in Sri Lanka. Talk to them. Get them to set it up. Have this process. And then you can announce it in Geneva. The process of political dialogue should be for the purpose of drawing up a roadmap for the full, if graduated, implementation of the 13th Amendment. Point 3 is that we should appoint 2 committees, one on the possible effects of economic sanctions, and that should have the top economists in the country, Dr. Indrajit Kumaraswamy, Dr. Saman Kalaigama, Dr. Lloyd Fernando, Professor Nimal Sandaratna, Dr. Dushim Vihirko. And there should be another team looking at the international legal ramifications, headed by Dr. Rohan Pereira, who was the chairman of the UN Ad hoc Committee on Terrorism in New York, and a member of the International Law Council. So we should have these 2 committees studying the possible implications of moves against Sri Lanka. And the fourth and final point I would make is talk to the Russians and the Chinese. Don't ask them for votes. They're going to vote for us anyway, and they must be talking to people and trying to get us votes. That's not it. Learn from what happened with Iran and Syria. The Americans were about to hit the Syrians. And they might have hit the Iranians. Certainly the Israelis wanted them to. But now they're talking. How did this happen? Because Russia, quietly supported by China, made a diplomatic intervention and came up with a creative proposal which brought both sides to the negotiating table. So ask our friends, the Russians, the Chinese, and other powerful, pivotal states like the Indonesians to not move a counter resolution. I mean, that's crazy. But to take a diplomatic initiative based on the reform measures that we are willing to take. And to move in the council and say, look, this is a dangerous polarization. It's a dangerous precedent. The Sri Lankans have promised to do this. We stand guarantee for them. And let's have some kind of an intermediate settlement or solution. Take the international inquiry off the table, and we will get the Sri Lankans to do all the other things that Nabi Pillai has listed, or the West is concerned about, which is really to do with the domestic human rights situation and an independent accountability hearing into the last stages of the war.
We end this edition with a song from Rukshan Pereira, Sunil Pereira and Sohan Veerasinghe.
Good morning, Mr. Cameron. You sound like a broken takaran. Why hiding behind the lies, Mr. Cameron? Pretending to help our nation for the sake of your next election. Don't use us to win your votes, Mr. Cameron. Why use us to win your votes, Mr. Cameron?
Why the double standards when you talk of human rights? Who bombed Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iraq with pride? Now millions of deaths and tortures and illegal drones. Cut the bull on human rights, Mr. Cameron. Cut the bull on human rights, Mr. Cameron.
Colonial days are gone, end of our master plan. You rob the poorest nations to build your own dreamland. Those people in glass houses, they should not throw stones. Don't bring shame to your country, Mr. Cameron. Don't bring shame to your country, Mr. Cameron.
Good morning, Mr. Cameron. You sound like a broken takaran. Why hiding behind the lies, Mr. Cameron? Pretending to help our nation for the sake of your next election. Don't use us to win your votes, Mr. Cameron. Why use us to win your votes, Mr. Cameron?
We ended a brutal war without any help from you. Children in the north got their lives back, now they go to school. Instead of helping us to forgive and build our land, why forever drag us down, Mr. Cameron? Why forever drag us down, Mr. Cameron?
When our nation's marching forward, you pretend you're blind. Why enjoy breaking us up? Is that your only style? Divide and rule, it lasted in colonial times. Now be wise to your disguise, Mr. Cameron. Now be wise to your disguise, Mr. Cameron. Yeah,
good morning, Mr. Cameron. You sound like a broken takaran. Why hiding behind the lies, Mr. Cameron? Pretending to help our nation for the sake of your next election. Don't use us to win your votes, Mr. Cameron. Why use us to win your votes, Mr. Cameron?
Are you envious we ended the war,
Mr. Cameron?
Why promoting double standards,
Mr. Cameron? Stop bullying us small countries, Mr. Cameron.